Hey, welcome to the Connect podcast. I'm so glad that you are joining us today. And we are here with my good friend, Pastor Bobby.
How's it going?
Very good. It has been great. And how have you been?
I have been doing really well.
Okay.
Excited to talk
Good to
today
hear.
with you.
Yeah. And I hope as you're listening, you've been doing great. But like I said, on Sunday, life isn't always all great. And so sometimes, there's the hard roads. That's really what our series has been about that we've been in, called God's Way is Better. I want to begin just saying that we just had an incredible weekend along with my beautiful bride, Pam. We celebrated our 35th wedding anniversary.
That's amazing.
Yes, it really is great. And we...
Do you have any wisdom after 35 years of marriage? What's the secret?
Well, we started as kids. We were young, dumb, and in love. And I was 21 years old. We had no money and no idea what we were doing, no idea what we were getting into. And it was hard. Our first year was very hard. And I without Jesus in the center of our marriage, we would not still be here today. And I think a lot of people, when it comes to Pam, they may not realize, but her faithfulness is the key as to why we have the Connection Church even today, that she was willing to follow God's leading in my life to come and get this church started. And she has said yes a lot to a lot of crazy ideas that I've had, and not knowing how they're all going to work out. But God has been so good to us, and we've been so blessed so far. And starting the sermon on Sunday, I was talking about the best yes, and we said I do without any real awareness of the fact that was just the first of thousands of I do's that we would be saying. I still do. I still choose you. I still forgive.
Wow.
I still show up. I still am going to serve. I'm still going to lay down my own selfish desires for the sake of you. And it's something that is hard. It's a hard road, but it's the best road. And so
that's great. I love that. Well, you were saying, I asked you, what's the secret? And you said, well, obviously Jesus at the foundation. So if you're not going and putting him first in the relationship and in your life, then you don't really have the capacity to still saying I do today.
Yeah.
And later today and tonight.
Yeah.
And tomorrow, because you're going to be running off of your own self, your own strength, your own perseverance. That comes from the Lord. So a relationship with Jesus first. I like to think of it as a triangle, and you've got you and your spouse on the bottom ends of that triangle. If you put Jesus at the top, as you both pursue him, you grow closer together.
Yeah.
If you put your spouse at the top, everything falls apart.
Mm-hmm.
Because they may be a great person, but they're a horrible God.
That's right. And the fact is, in every marriage, he wants what he wants, she wants what she wants. Usually they don't want the same things. Maybe in the big picture, we want, a great house and a great this and that, but really our daily desires are very different. And so we've got to lay down our own desires and, choose the hard road for the sake of our spouse and for the sake of our covenant. And so yeah, there's been a lot of forgiveness that, it's daily massive doses of forgiveness and grace that are necessary. People talk about incompatibility, right? That's the grounds for divorce, that we're incompatible. Well, that's just a myth. Like every marriage is incompatible because you can't take two broken people and put them together and have something perfect. And, it's funny is Pam has been watching this, I shouldn't tell on her, but she's been watching this Married at First Sight show. And so I've got to see some of that over the past couple of days. And you talk about selfishness, man. These people, and, I laugh because I do see myself and, you see people reflected in this. It's not that they're just terrible people, even though why in the world would you sign up for this? It's funny critiquing this show because it's like, why would they do that? Why would they do that? Well, why would you sign up to get married without seeing or knowing someone. But of course, they don't work. It doesn't work out because they're in it for themselves. What's in this for me? And that's all they can think about. And sometimes that's all we can think about too. Is what do I get out of this? Why am I sacrificing? So this series, kind of transitioning this series, I've wanted to do this series for a long time. I've had it in the books for years, and I wanted to call it No Plan B, because whatever life you're living, whatever path you're on, if you're seeking after God, you are in God's plan A. It didn't come as a surprise to God, but wise counsel all told me, well, everybody's going to think this is about like the morning after pill. And I thought that's not, I don't want to have to deal with that kind of imagery or whatever. So we just called it God's Way is Better. And of course, there's that Forrest Frank song, Your Way's Better, which, by the way, speaking of Forrest Frank, it's crazy because there have been massive Christian music tours over the decades, arena tours, and just incredible. And the Forrest Frank tour that's happening right now, they say is the largest Christian tour, most successful Christian tour in history.
Really?
Yeah, I don't even know how that's possible. But we had a lot of our students who went when
I heard
they were
all
here. And of course, every show they have, it's multi-generational. They bring in a local pastor, they're preaching the gospel, and people are getting saved. It's you'd almost call it more of a revival than you would a concert.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it's so great. God's using Forrest Frank for big things. So we talked about saying yes in this week's message. This was the last message of this series. And we looked at Jesus saying yes to God when he's in the Garden of Gethsemane. And
so good.
Yeah. So he's showing us what it looks like to surrender, to fully surrender to God, how we can fully surrender to God in that process. And most powerful words that have ever been prayed are not my will, but yours be done. God, here's what I want. He said, God, I want this cup to pass from me if there's any other way, but ultimately there was no other way. And so he knew that God's will, God's priority was greater than his own.
Yeah. We live in a society that it's have it your way. Was it Burger King that Burger King used to say, have it your way.
Hold the pickles, hold the lettuce. We'll make sure you won't forget us.
Yeah.
Have it your way.
I think your sermon was just an awesome reminder that this is not Burger King. This is the King of Kings. This is the Lord of Lords. We can't have it our way. It's his way. His ways are higher than my ways. His thoughts are higher than my thoughts. It was a great refresher on the topic of surrender and trust and faith in what God has for me over what I have for me.
So God's ways are sometimes, and usually, they're harder than my way. I want comfort. I want the easy way.
Why is that, do you think?
Why do I want the easy way, or why is God's way the harder way?
Why is it the harder way?
Well,
the call of Christianity is not one of comfort. It's going to be outside of our zone of comfort. It's going to stretch us. It's going to grow us. It's going to develop us. Is it because, because I think a lot of people would say like, no, I have big plans for me and it's going to stretch me and it's going to grow me. And I want to be.
But you're never going to choose the actual hard path we may choose. You may say, well, going to college is hard, or, some of those things, but yeah, we want personal comfort, and Jesus calls us to sacrifice, because, this is how we grow, and this is how we show real obedience to God, not by doing what we want, but by doing what he wants.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so
if someone's out there and they're struggling with what is that direction, what does God want for me? I'm at a crossroads in my life. Do I do this or do I do that? Is it as simple and easy as you pray and God, the one that's the hard path, is the Lord speaking, and the one that is the easy path is your flesh. Peter asked Jesus if that's really you, right?
Maybe it's
And he's like,
my,
step out of the boat. And he's like, that's going to be hard for me to do.
yeah,
But he did it anyways.
yeah. I'm generally, an optimistic person, but I remember when I went to go get my first job and I started applying at some different little fast food restaurants, and I walked into Brahms, which, they sell ice cream, they sell hamburgers and things, but it seemed like the toughest one. And when I walked in, it was the one I least wanted. And I thought, this is the one that's going to give me the job. And it was, so sometimes you can look, you go, what's the easy path? What's the hard path? I bet it's that harder path that I'm supposed to walk. Of course, Jesus said there's a wide road and there's a narrow road.
There you go.
And, the narrow road hurts. The narrow road is the lonelier road.
Yeah. If I'm at a crossroads in, say, a relational rift in my family or at church, and I'm at this place where I either continue walking away from this relationship or I start to reconcile, walk towards it, forgiveness.
Well, you're
maybe
going to
saying I'm sorry. Like, that's the hard thing that I don't want to do. I want them to come to me.
You're going to have a lot of friends who are going to reinforce that. They're going to say, you got to look out for number one. You got to take care of yourself. God doesn't want you to be in this, in this relationship. Everybody's going to tell you that. Even some counselors are going to tell you that. But God's way is to say the two become one in a covenant relationship.
Yeah.
And so he takes that very seriously. And he's going to call you in because God doesn't just want you to be happy. Sure, happiness is great. He wants you to be holy. And the way we become holy is through the friction of iron sharpening iron, right? So that's how we grow. And God's way isn't always the easy way, but it's always the best way. It's always the better way. And
one of the things I love that you said, you're going to have some friends that are going to be telling you, hey, you're right in this, they're wrong. One of the best pieces of wisdom you've ever given me, Pastor Cole, is there are going to be people in your life that have a gallon of water and there are going to be people who have a gallon of gasoline. Make sure you go to the people who have a gallon of water when you are facing fires in your life, because they're going to help put it out, squelch it, and they're not going to be a part of the problem.
Yeah, that's good.
Right. And so in this story that you talked about, Jesus brings
his three closest
he brings his
disciples,
boys with him.
And it's at the most vulnerable part of his life, but he didn't face it alone. And so we say you should never go through those difficult moments by yourself. When we're going through those difficult moments, many times we want to insulate and isolate, and we don't want to deal with people. But that's the point when we most need some godly counsel, some godly advice, and people who will stick with you during those hard moments. They're not going to run away from you. So we've got to have some people around us to challenge us to do God's way, to encourage us to do it God's way. And, we were discussing just a minute ago about Jesus in the garden. And I was saying that I felt uncomfortable saying Jesus was feeling this deep despair. It didn't even feel right, because we're talking about Jesus is God in the flesh, right? God in a body. And so someone had even said something to you like, how does that work? How could God feel despair?
Right. Well, I mean, we understand, we say things like Jesus is fully God and fully human. I was telling this gentleman that asked me on Sunday, how could he be at the point of despair? How could he sweat blood? How could he be so stressed when he's God? We say he's big, and what we call big, he calls small. How could he be so stressed about this? And I was trying to explain to him, he was taking on more than just, it wasn't just like, oh, this is the hard thing to do. He was taking on the sin of humanity in that moment.
Yeah, what
there
I
was
said,
so much pressure and weight behind this.
This wasn't just the physical suffering, the emotional suffering, but literally he was taking onto himself the full judgment of all the sin of all the people throughout all time, all around the world. And you think about what that means. Think about the worst murderers that you can think of, or just all the horrible things. I don't even want to mention the unspeakable things that people can do. And yet Jesus took that onto himself and he became sin for us so we could become the righteousness of God.
Yeah.
And
well, the word there I told him is kenosis.
Mhm.
And if he's looking for a way that he can study it, just type that in. It's Kenosis, and it's the doctrine of Christ self-emptying himself of his incarnation. And so I was trying to explain, I'm not the best, but I was trying to explain, it doesn't say what he emptied himself of in Philippians 2:7 when it says that Christ emptied himself by taking on the form of a servant, being born in the likeness of mankind. That's that word empty right there is where that word kenosis comes from.
Yeah, theologians debate that, and really there's a mystery to it that we're not going to fully understand because this is a God thing. But you just start from the beginning that he left the riches and the glories of heaven. He was born literally in a barn into a human body with all of our limitations, all of our frailties, all of the things that can happen in our bodies.
Yeah.
And so he limited that part. And
I let him know he was giving up his like the privileges of heaven. When he stepped out into humanity.
Yeah. We have to tread very carefully as we talk about what he was and what he wasn't, because obviously there's times in the Gospels where he had foreknowledge. It says he knew men's hearts. He knew some things that were about to happen. And he certainly knew what the cross was all about. And that he knew that was why he
That was his mission. Plan A from the beginning.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And you really brought that point home when he said, because of this, we can't answer all the questions, but because of it, we have a high priest who is able to sympathize with us, and he gets us and he understands us because he can relate to you. He doesn't just know what you're going through. He went through it.
Right. Yeah. And so sometimes what we do in our own selves is we say, God, here's what I want. Bless what I want. Bless my plans. Here's my plans. And I've got this 10-point plan or whatever it is. And so rather than saying, God, I want to do what you're blessing, I want to be about what you're doing in the world. And that's really how you discover your purpose, is by involving yourself in what God's doing. And if you look around, you'll see God at work. If you look around the Connection Church, you see God at work every day in lives. So I would, if you're looking for a way to get in on what God is up to, I would say jump into the Connection Church or jump into a Bible teaching, Bible believing, active, reaching church where lives are being changed, and be a part of that.
It's good.
It's the best thing going. It's the best thing going. So
we talked, you mentioned the Mount of Olives.
Okay. Yeah. Let's talk about that.
You mentioned how it was a place of crushing.
Yeah.
That was so good.
Yeah. Gethsemane means oil press, and it crushed the olives. The olives were crushed under tremendous pressure so that what was inside came out. The oil began flowing. Same thing happened to Jesus in that moment. He was crushed and he literally sweat drops of blood. That's a real verified medical condition called hematidrosis. And it happens sometimes when people are under incredible stress or anxiety, feel pressure, that it can happen. And that's what happened to Jesus. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, when you were talking about that, I was thinking, there's that scripture in Zechariah 14:4 that says that when Jesus returns, or the Lord returns, and it's prophecy of the second coming of Christ, that his feet will touch the Mount of Olives. Let me pull it up. I have it pulled up right here. Yeah. On that day, his feet shall stand on the Mount of Olives that lies before Jerusalem on the east, and the Mount of Olives shall be split into two from east to west by the very wide valley, so that half of the mountain shall be moved northward and the other will be southward. So Jesus is going to come back. So it's almost like what started with suffering in that garden is going to end
in victory.
In victory.
Yeah. Yeah. That's good. Well, that shows God's way is not always the easy way. Many times it's the hard way. It's always the right way. It's
There
always
you
the
go.
best way when we say
And when
yes.
it's God's way, it ends in victory.
Yeah. Yeah.
Love that. So good.
So I wanted us to kind of shift to apply some of this to some of the headlines that we've been seeing this week.
Oh, I love that,
some of the
because
biggest.
one, and that just to tie it in for us, he takes Peter, James, and John, and they keep sleeping, and he wakes them up. And he's
Okay.
like, "Can't you just stay awake and
Yeah.
keep watch?" And I think there's a spiritual attack going on there
Yeah,
that,
definitely.
Peter, James, and John are falling asleep. I told you this. I've always wanted to do a sermon on this, that there's a time when Peter, James, and John are in a boat and Jesus is asleep.
Yeah.
And they're in a storm of their life, and Jesus is asleep in the bottom of the boat, and they go to him and go, "Can't you just get up? And how are you not panicking and freaking out?" And then you contrast that with the Garden of Gethsemane.
Mhm.
And you've got Jesus who is awake, and Peter, James, and John are
And
asleep
Jesus is
in the
going through the
storm
storm.
of his life.
Mhm.
And he's like, so I don't know what, the whole application is there. Maybe there's some storms we should
Well,
sleep through and let Jesus handle.
That's
And
good.
maybe there's some things that Jesus says, these are storms you need to keep watch and to be praying for. And that's the strategy of Satan, is to lull you asleep, that you fight with your eyes closed, so that you don't start to notice the things that he's doing. And I think those are these cultural things, like who's really behind some of these things that are popular in culture right now.
Yeah.
It's Satan. And if you don't
No
have your
doubt.
eyes open, if you're spiritually hitting the snooze button, you're not going to identify who's really the target of your prayer life.
Yeah. And if you want to see something demonic, then you should see the gathering of ladies that gathered around the Massachusetts governor, Mara Healey, who signed this week. She signed this sweeping abortion bill that that allows for abortion up and through 9 months of pregnancy. And so basically putting it in the hands of the doctors to have that discretion to be able to terminate a pregnancy up to 9 months, and which is unthinkable. It's unthinkable because the only difference between a baby in the womb at 8 months, 3 weeks, and one that is outside of the womb is just location. It's the same human, same person. And yet in the womb, the place that should be the safest place for a baby with mom there becomes the most dangerous place. And it's really interesting that the progression that happens on these things in our culture is because I remember this was a big topic in the last presidential election. They were saying that, and they were fighting about whether or not there were some places where doctors could abort, or mothers could abort babies all the way up until 9 months. And they were saying, that's not happening anywhere. That's not happening. That's not happening. So the progression is, they go from, first they say, it's not happening. That terrible thing isn't happening that you're saying. I can't believe you're saying that. And then they say, well, it is happening a little, some, but it's no big deal. Don't worry about it. The third step is, they say, no, actually it is happening, and it's a good thing, and we should celebrate it. We should applaud it. And that's what they did here in Massachusetts.
That's horrible. It's horrific.
Yeah.
I just watched, my wife was showing me this YouTube short of this couple that went in to get, they have the ultrasound, but they do it in the 3D where you can see more rendering of the features of your baby. And the dad gets down by the belly and he's like, hey, you know whose voice this is? While they're doing the ultrasound. And the craziest thing happened. That baby smiles. And so I wish we could show stuff, but like, you look at those pictures of those babies smiling there with the 3D ultrasound. You can see the smirk. You can see the eyes wrinkle in this, and the sides of their lips curl up like that. You can't tell me that that's not human, because that's human emotion.
Yes.
And response.
Yeah. Yeah. And that starts, there's no logical or scientific biological point other than conception for you to say here's when life starts. The moment of conception is when that whole process begins, and unless something happens to prevent it, it's going to continue. You're going to continue growing. All of us started out the very same way, and we continue to grow. And so
I've been so proud of some of the families, some of the married couples in our church who have been not given the best news when it comes to their pregnancies, or that there's not a lot of hope, and they have been encouraged to terminate, to have an abortion in the name of, this is best for your family. And they've said, no, like, we're going to put this in God's hands. And we've seen the church rally around them, their friends rally around them. And some, it ended in, that baby not living, and ended in a early term miscarriage.
Mm-hmm.
But just to see those couples put their trust in the Lord and say, God, this is in your hands. I'm not going to play God.
That's what we're talking about. God's way is better, even when it's harder, even when it's not what we would, choose, but our choice. It's funny when you talk about choice, pro-choice. People say I'm pro-choice. Well, what they're talking about is one choice, the choice to end the baby's life. There are other choices that you can make. You can make the choice of adoption. You can make the choice of certainly keeping the baby. There's lots of choices besides ending the life of this most vulnerable of all people. And so what we want to do, we want to come around families, like as you're saying, support them, give them the resources they need, give them the information that they need, and really also do what we can to prevent legislation like this, because this is the 10th state to remove those limits on abortion. And so we are called to protect the most vulnerable, and Christians have done this from the very beginning. This is what set Christians apart. And so we say we protect life from the womb to the tomb.
I love it.
All the way. Let's talk about another one when we're looking at some of these issues that are going on right now, and that is the Democratic state representative and U.S. Senate candidate James Tallarico, who is making the news now.
Our buddy James.
He's making the news right now because he is tying his platform to his church, which is the Presbyterian Church that he's saying this is what has shaped my beliefs and my platform and my career. And so when you look at what he says about his church, which is a church in Austin, St. Andrews, he was taught by the pastor, Jim Rigby, that Christianity means causing trouble on behalf of marginalized people. So that's Christianity to him. And he says we stood up for, they were affirming of LGBTQ rights. They admitted an atheist, a known atheist or an admitted atheist, into membership of the church. And they were also sheltering, an undocumented mother and son. And so what he's saying is that he learned all of his platform policies from his church. And at the same time, here's the funniest part of it. Okay, here's what I learned from my church. And those are things, he says, we should believe and we should carry out as policy and legislation. The flip side, he says, is he's arguing against putting the 10 Commandments in schools, using chaplains in place of counselors. He's arguing against any restrictions on abortion. He's arguing in favor of gender transition surgeries for minors. Okay. And he says those people that are opposed to that, he calls them Christian nationalists, or he also calls them Christo-fascists. So it's interesting because he says religion or faith and politics need to be separated when it is conservative biblical Christianity, traditional Christianity, those need to be opposed, and yet his version of Christianity is he's totally fine with those being made policy. You see the contradiction there?
Uh-huh.
Yeah. So it's
very political.
It's really not an issue. The issue is that people say, well, I want to separate church and state. The fact is,
you can't.
You're always, some belief system is going to win out. Some moral framework is going to set policy. The question is whose and which. And so that's why it's so important that as Christians that we are able to vote our conscience, stand for what is true and what is right, and stand against both progressive political policies and progressive so-called Christianity, because this church, let's face it, this is not really a church. It's a leftist indoctrination center.
Yeah, I would say he touts that he is a faithful Christian, and I would say he's a fake Christian, that everything that he promotes flies in the face of what Jesus taught, what the Bible calls us to do, his way, not our way. This is not a personal preference religion. You can't just, we get used to our iPhones. Like, I can set up my iPhone however I want. You can set up your Gmail however you want. You can have dark mode. You can have light mode, big font, small font. Our faith is not ran like that. It's not my preference. It is not what I prefer.
Not Burger King.
This is what God said. And I do that. And so you've got a lot of, wherever we're at culturally, sliding the topic over to whether it's on abortion or men and women's sports or you name it, pronouns. There's a lot of going what God calls evil good and what God calls good evil. You have that going on right there with this gentleman, and I would say beware.
Sure, that's good. Let's talk about another one.
What's another one?
Another one is what's going on in basketball with the WNBA. Right. So we're seeing a lot.
Nobody's watched WNBA more than the last couple of weeks.
Yeah. It's good.
Or
good promo
into what's going on.
WNBA, and it would be even bigger if they go ahead and allow these guys who want to be draft prospects for the next season.
Yeah.
If they get Ennis Freedom Cantor, Royce White, they both announced that they want to play with the WNBA, because they basically have a problem now, because this is a women's league in a league that cannot seem to define what a woman is. And so they're saying they're going to have ongoing talks to try to figure out what a woman is, especially in light or in response to Sophie Cunningham from Indiana Fever, who has stood for women and women's rights. And so this has sparked a lot of controversy. But they need, if you're going to have women's spaces, you're going to have women's sports, which, started to give women the same opportunities that you would give men, right? It's a good thing to have them, even though people don't tend to watch the NBA as much as they do the NBA. But where am I going with this? If you erase the categories and you say we don't know what a woman is, then you've effectively erased the sport. You've erased the league.
Yeah. So you can't, if you erase the categories, why were women's athletics, why was that category created?
Well, and there are,
women's sports versus
I can
men's
promise
sports.
you there's some women that could probably
beat you in pickleball.
Me in pickleball.
Come on. Yeah, for sure.
But as a whole, you've got a women's basketball team, a professional women's basketball team would struggle against a high school boys team. And so it's just basic biology.
What's the gentleman's name that just
Clay Travis?
Clay Travis. He bet he said I would pay the WNBA $10 million if they can beat a high school boys team, like the Los Vegas
And
women's
they may
team
not
or
feel
something.
good to people to admit that truth, but it's the truth. It's just biological reality. And so, what we want to do is we want to help people who are struggling with gender confusion, because we've met some of those people, and we always want to come alongside of them and help them. But you don't help somebody by lying to them. You help them by speaking the truth in love, by walking alongside with them, but certainly not putting them in spaces that will then take away the rights of actual women and the reason these things were created.
Mm-hmm.
So, and we got one other topic, and that is the just kind of moving closer into the church, but they're Bible translations.
Ooh.
So there are translations, and then there are
Abominations.
Yeah. The Passion Translation is getting some headlines because one thing that happened was the Bethel Church stopped selling its special edition of the Passion Translation that they had not long ago, about a year ago, they had held up as a great translation. And so the Passion Translation essentially was written by a guy named Brian Simmons, who we've found now plagiarized a lot of the translation, didn't do his own original work, and didn't use good translation methodology working from the original languages of the Greek and the Hebrew. And so this is crazy too. Simmons also says that he had a visit from an angel named Passion that inspired his Bible translation. Okay, so just the angel was named Passion. So some major platforms, Bible Gateway in 2022 online removed the Passion Translation from its platform. There's a petition calling on YouVersion, which is the what we usually just call the Bible app, to take the Passion Translation off. They haven't done that yet, but what I want to say, you have any comments you want to make about that? Because I've got a few things to say.
Galatians 1:8. But even if we or an angel from heaven named Passion should preach to you a gospel contrary to the one we preach, let him be cursed.
That's good. Well, what we want people to know is that you can trust your Bible. And generally speaking, most Bible translations are trustworthy, done with good scholarship. Usually it's a team of people, so there's checks and balances at work there. And some good translations, the ESV, the NIV, the NASB, the CSB. These are all
the
good.
NLT,
the NLT, and what they did with that, now, there are paraphrases, and then there are things, if you look at it, some are closer to the exact original biblical languages, and then some actually take it and put it, they'll put it into a more speakable, English phrasing. But
my understanding is, I know it comes from the Living Bible. I cannot remember the name of the gentleman who wrote the Living Bible, but I thought that I had read somewhere that Billy Graham really loved this. It wasn't a translation. It was just more of like he was reading the Bible to his kids in the King James, and they couldn't understand it. So this gentleman says, I'm going to paraphrase it into a language that my kids can get at night. So he would spend time on the bus to work. He would spend time in the late evenings writing out the stories of the Bible, and he put together the Living Bible. Billy Graham's like, this is amazing. At some point, Tyndale Publishing picks it up. They sell millions of copies as a green Living Bible. And then later on, they were like, hey, we want to make this an actual translation, an accurate translation. And where he knocked it out of the park, we're going to keep that. And where it's off, we're going to get like 90-something scholars. And we're going to spend 10 years, and we're going to go through this, and we're going to put it in this very readable format for you.
That's good. That's a good explanation. I love it.
It's my favorite version right now. I'm reading the ESV and the NLT.
That's good. That's good. Yeah. Yeah. We love that. And so when you go to the Bible, you just want to know that it is actually something that is trustworthy, that has good scholarship behind it. And the Passion Translation doesn't meet that qualification. So we would say avoid that translation. Don't use that, but there are many other good translations that you
What are some other
can
translations
use.
to avoid?
I mean, that's the one. The Watchtower translation, the Jehovah's Witnesses translation. You want to avoid that one for sure. But there are there are pros and cons to many different translations.
That's the New World Translation.
The New World Translation, yeah, you want to avoid that one. But you're gonna be good with most of what you find. If you have something that you question, then go ahead and let us know.
When it comes to translations, I heard someone say one time that if you were to take Moses, who wrote the first 5 books of the Bible, and you put him in a room with, say, like one of the prophets, there's like hundreds, if not 1,000 years in between those two people. They're both speaking Hebrew or, Old Aramaic Hebrew. Like, they would not be able to have a conversation with each other if they're in the same room. In the same way, like if I went back to England and spoke English with those old English peoples in like 800 years ago, we have no clue what we're talking about. So that idea of like, I want the most accurate Bible word for word is kind of the wrong way to approach it. It is, if what the original writer was trying to say and communicate never gets communicated in the translation, it's not an accurate translation. You've got to know the heart, and you got to know what's being said. And that's what makes translation so difficult.
Yeah.
But all the Bibles that are on our app, you can.
Yeah. If it's on the Connection Church app,
you can trust it.
You can trust it.
It's
you
good.
can trust it. Now, I want to kind of go full circle here and come back to the Garden of Gethsemane, because Gethsemane confronts every one of these headlines that we've talked about. Jesus said, "Not my will, but yours be done." When it comes to the issue of life and abortion, what's the mantra? It is my body, my choice, right? It's I'm doing what I want.
This is going to ruin my plans for life. I'm not going to be able to have the career path I want. This is going to really throw a chink in my chain. Yeah.
Or if you go to James Tallarico, it's, am I going to be faithful to the Word of God, or do I want to simply achieve a political victory of power? Am I going to applaud what the culture is doing when it comes to gender confusion, or am I going to stand on God's creation and God's original design for one man and one woman? And in the beginning, God made them male and female.
That's good.
Am I going to, even when it comes to the translation of the Passion, do I want to just feel it and enjoy this modern take on the Bible, or do I want to carefully handle the Word of God? So Jesus shows us this better way, and that is to trust Him and to do what He says, and that we would also say, not my will, but yours be done. So in all of our lives, we need to be asking, where is it that God is asking us to surrender our own preferences, our own way, and follow His way and say yes to God's best?
That's so good. I love it.
Very good. All right. Well,
great.
Have a great week, and we look forward to seeing you real soon.